Hi everyone, welcome to Food Tech Talk with Mrs. K on Enterprise TV. I'm so glad you joined us today to learn about the food industry, especially what concerns the SMEs, what concerns you as a consumer. And for now, we've been talking about health and safety as it concerns the food industry. And today we're going to be talking about food safety hazards. We've explained what hazards are, the things that expose us to risk in our workplace, as consumers, as producers. And today we're looking at food safety hazards as it concerns you, the entrepreneur working in your food processing facility. The food safety hazards, there are three major ones that we're going to be looking at today: the physical hazard, the chemical hazards, and the biological hazards. Yes, we're talking about physics, chemistry, and biology. Okay, so let's go right into it. What are these physical hazards? Well, physical hazards are physical things we can see with our eyes, that can cause harm to us. When you're talking about physical hazards, you're talking about particles in food. In Nigeria, for instance, most of our agro-processed foods they don't even care. They don't simply care. So when you are producing maybe from the farm, if you're getting your raw materials, let's say you are producing packaged beans or packaged rice or whatever it is you're packaging, as an entrepreneur, you are not going to just get it straight from the farm and seal up in bags. You're going to take out, you're going to sort them out and remove all those physical contaminants. So physical hazards are things that get into the food and potentially can harm the final consumer. These are the things I'm referring to. Like if you're making baby food, for instance, you know that if you're finding pieces of eggshells or bones inside it, it's a very big problem. As tiny as the eggshell may be, it can actually cause an infant to be in distress or potentially end the life. So these are the things we need to pay attention. Pieces of plastics in food can expose people to plastics. You're not supposed to consume plastics. They are carcinogens. They have a lot of health risks associated with them. Bones in infant food, bones in powdered food that you're not supposed to start sorting again. Why these physical hazards happen? Why you find these contaminants in packaged food most times is maybe due to poor sorting, poor inspection. You're not looking at what is leaving your factory. It can also be caused by faulty equipment. You may have an equipment that is grinding hardly, and the particles of the grinding machine are entering into the food product that you're producing. Most of these hazards are preventable. So the chemical hazards are when you have chemicals contaminating the food or maybe affecting the workers in the workplace. I'll give you a few examples. Detergents finding its way in Zobo drink. How do you explain that? These are chemicals, bottles that are washed with bleach in an effort to sanitize it, to clean it very well, but the bleach is not well rinsed out, and the drink, tiger nut drink, whatever it is you're bottling, is packaged along with improperly rinsed bottles. These are chemical hazards that can harm the final consumer. How about mixing chemicals within the workplace? I've been in somebody's factory space, and because she has a lot of stains in the workplace, she's now mixing bleach with hot water. That is disaster. You're going to release chlorine in the air immediately. Mixing bleach with certain detergents that you don't know the components. These are chemical hazards. They can potentially cause harm, not just to final consumer this time, but that person, that team member that is responsible for cleaning and is inhaling chlorine is at risk of chemical poison. Why this happens is because people don't read labels. People buy products that are manufactured with ingredients that you have no idea what is inside. So it's advisable that you buy from known sources and you ask for a list of ingredients of whatever you are buying, especially if you're talking about cleaning equipment, fumigation equipment. This is also part of reasons why you see that when NAFDAC wants to certify a food processing area, they insist that you do not handle fumigation yourself, except you are trained in that area also. They always ask you to hand it over to a professional to do that because of this same thing, because chemical hazards are real. As a food producer, if you produce 1,000 packets of your food product or 1,000 bottles in a month, trust me that it's possible that 1,000 people are going to consume that product from you. So it's different from what you produce in your kitchen out of your carelessness. If you produce carelessly in your kitchen, it's going to affect only you. Or maybe your body system isn't tolerate such chemicals. But what if it's let out into the public and a lot of people consume such contaminated food products? It's a big disaster. It's a national problem, let me put it that way. Most times it's carelessness. Most times people don't read labels. Most times people keep chemicals in wrong places. So if you're designing your workspace, ensure that the area that's where you keep chemicals, especially maybe cleaning agents, maybe other chemical additives that you add, is segregated, and if possible, under lock and key, so that any person going to take that will actually pay attention to what he's doing. Nobody will mindlessly pick a bottle from the table and pour into a food product. The next one we're going to be looking at is biological hazard. What are biological hazards? These are microorganisms. These are macroorganisms, living things. When you're talking about biology, we're talking about living things. So we're talking about how living things can cause harm in our food or in our work environment. When you're talking about living things, bacteria, fungi, mold, even rodents, rats, pests, weevils, any form of biological hazard, anything that is breathing, anything that is alive that can potentially cause harm, either to the workers working with you or to the food itself that you are releasing to the public. These are biological hazards. And how does it happen? These come when foods are not stored right. So when you're talking about exposing people to fungi, bacteria, microorganisms, or other microorganisms, where do you source your food? Traceability comes into place. How do you source your raw materials? How do you store your raw materials? If you store at wrong temperature, you may be breeding weevils, mites, or mold. If you store in damp places, you are at risk of mold and fungi. If you are storing under wrong temperature conditions, the same applies. Biological hazards can occur. If you do not take care of the environment where you are working, you may be having rat infestation, weevil infestation, all sorts of animals may begin to cluster in your work location. Biological hazards also concerns your water. What is the quality of water you are using? Because some of these contamination can come from water. Okay, we're talking about sources of these biological hazards. Water, unsafe water. Water that should be used in the food processing area has to be potable water. It has to be clean water. It has to be water that is consumable, is safe for human consumption. That is the only water acceptable in the workplace, because water is a medium that can really harbor all sorts of contaminants if it is not properly kept, if it's not properly cleaned. So the water safety, also biological hazard can also come from your team. Hand washing is very important. How often do you wash your hands as a food producer? Do you wash your hand in the morning and never again until when you are closing for the day? Hand washing should be a frequent task. It should be frequent. You wash, you dry your hands, and you get back to work. Hand washing should happen anytime you have contact with your body. Some people are so itchy, or the environment where you're working is uncomfortable. You find out that you're scratching your skin. If you do that, please go back and wash your hands. If you scratch your hair, go back and wash your hands. Of course, the hair should be covered in a work environment in the food producing area. But even at that, if you notice that your hand has touched surfaces other than food, you should still go and wash your hand. On clean surfaces, how is your packaging area? How is your processing area? If you do not clean, if you do not sanitize where sanitizing is needed, if you do not sterilize vessels that need to be sterilized, it's being exposed to biological hazards. I hope you have learned something new from today's episode of Food Tech Talk with Mrs. K. I'm glad you joined us today for this educational session. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe immediately and click on the notification button to ensure that you get notified each time we have a new video. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Food Tech Talk with Mrs. K on Center-ECD Enterprise TV. I hope you join us for the next session.